Okay.
Unmute me. It's loaded, so.
Yeah, so I don't know if we should. Wow. Wait.
This is the.
No, but I think.
Testing, 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 1, 2, 3. Testing.
Yeah. Wow. I think the problem is me, he's not you. So I should not speak in front of the computer. I have to stay mute. It's not about you, but that's okay. That's okay. That's good. That's okay. No, I have to stay mute myself.
Yeah.
If I want to speak, I have to get away.
Okay, I think we're about to get underway again. If people can hear me, can you hear me down the back? It's not working. Hello, testing, testing, testing.
People, quiet.
Good. No, it's gone. Is it good? Can you hear me down the back, Daniela? Yes, you can. Great. Okay. And we've got.
Stay there.
Oh, I don't know how loud to speak, but can the people online hear me? Just give a thumbs up. I was looking. Or Richard Levy, can you hear me?
I can.
Is it okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear.
So you can hear me, then we'll start. Yeah. So now we come to the strategic discussion. We realise that we're at the midway point. We realise we've got really large. We realise that we're in danger of working in 3 silos and 3 themes, 1, 2, and 3. Mike made a really interesting comment about some of the trade-offs, the fact that he doesn't see as much of the community as we used to see during PACE and ACE meetings. because that's really theme one these days. But by the same token, he's now working with modern process people, he's working with modelers. So that's something to think about as we go forward in terms of what's working. And I think we've got some more slides, haven't we, Flo, that we've listed we've actually listed some of the things we think are working well and some of the things we think are perhaps more challenging that we should talk about. But we also want to have a discussion about the emerging issues and the key things we should spend our next 4 years working on, bearing in mind we can't do everything. And we're a very large program with lots of interests, but we want to be impactful. At the end of 8 years, we want to be able to say we've achieved certain things. But as we go through the process of those 8 years, different issues arise. And so that's why Flo sent out a questionnaire to see, and we got some responses, and we'll talk about that. It wasn't that comprehensive, so it's an ongoing process of amongst ourselves deciding what we think we should really focus on. In the Trieste meeting, for those of you who were there, each team identified priorities, things that they thought were important, and we've captured those, and so we know what they are. They may be changing, and there are always new things coming to affect our community, and one of them is geoengineering, polar geoengineering. So that's something what we need to embrace. It's something SCAR needs to embrace, and Mike Bentley's been quite involved in it. I know a number of you here have been quite involved in thinking around polar engineering. So we're going to ask Mike to make a few comments when the time's right, Mike, on that. Thank you very much. So what's working? Let's have a bit of a chat about that. We've got a roaming microphone, so just put up your hand and online, yell out if you want to say something. But these are the things we think are going pretty good. We've got a pretty good external reputation and recognition. The review went really well. We were very highly ranked. We got 11 A's and 1 B from the delegates. The external referees didn't really say a lot. It wasn't much you could really take from it. And SCADM, the Standing Committee for Antarctic Data Management, have asked us some questions that are sort of technical in nature, which we don't really have to deal with here. But they are concerned about how we're dealing and capturing and storing our data. And are we using SCAR principles, FAIR principles, all that sort of thing. My initial comment was, response to that is, most of us are working in rather large programs. So, for example, Space 2C is a drilling project that's underway in the Ross Sea that is within instant. And they have their own data management policies. It's not up to us to do that. They the projects themselves. So my answer is, yes, we should make all our community aware that there are procedures and protocols for dealing with data, but they usually happen at the project level. So I'm not going to, it's a boring, should say that. Some people love data and say, oh, well, I should be careful, but you like that. Oh, yeah. And, but yeah, it's an important, but it's not such much. But it's the other thing, we've been highly productive. You can see the papers coming out. You can see within the themes, the work, the seminars, the policy work. It's pretty impressive, and it's got impact. And we're developing this new relationship with social scientists and people who deal with people. And for some of us, it's an uncomfortable fit. We're just like science. For others, we really want to connect with the end users, the public, the stakeholders. So it's really been good to have the HAS people involved, Rebecca Priestley, and the presentation you heard today. And the challenge of not only trying to get information across to the public so they're better informed and not scared, but empowered, but also working with our stakeholders who are desperately in need of information as well. So that's as you say, it's a growth area. You guys have only had 10 years at this, and we've been, but for us, we're very new to it as well. So I think it's an exciting part of what we're trying to achieve. So that's on the good side. I think we're building strong external relationships, speed it up, Tim. We're supporting ECRs. Okay, the question marks. How are we doing with communication and integration across Instant? Is it working? Do you feel connected? Or do you just really deal with your own little subcommittee? We feel like we get a pretty good helicopter view, but I suspect within the themes, it's not, you're just dealing with your subcommittee. The theme too, the solid earthers are working with solid earthers. Because the original concept, there would be much more cross connection, and that would then really help theme 3 deliver on the integrated products, which involve solid earth, which involve the climate forcing and how the ice sheet responds to all of that, so we can get better models for future sea level projections or past reconstructions. So I think that's a challenge. Are we delivering on the mission? The mission is to improve Antarctic understanding of Antarctic mass loss, past, present, and future, but also with the goal of improving our understanding, even if it's just of the uncertainties. Maybe we don't solve the uncertainties, but at least we understand the uncertainties and can communicate them better to stakeholders. So they, a lot of stakeholders don't like uncertainty, but that's the world we live in. There is uncertainty. So how do we understand that uncertainty and communicate it better? So are we delivering on that mission? At the end of it, will the world feel more comfortable? They understand what the Antarctic ice sheet's going to do in terms of melting and how it's going to contribute to sea level, or will we be just as confused? Or will there still be big uncertainties, but communities, stakeholders, end users feel that they have a better knowledge about what's going on? So, yeah. So that's a real challenge. So I don't think we're there yet. Focus on emerging issues, and we've got a list of those. And one of the things Flo and I, and particularly building up to the conference, we were pretty stretched. And this is a big SRP, but it gets more funding, but we don't have a lot of extra support. And so we've been in our report, our midterm report, we asked the question, what does SCAR want us to be? How big is too big? What is a strategic research program supposed to achieve? Have we overdone it? I mean, are we going too far in too many directions? And particularly leading up to the conference, we were feeling very stretched and needing support, and thinking, oh, it'd be nice to have some money to employ a project manager or someone to do some bit of extra work. And where do you get that money from? So we've had those discussions. Since the conference, I think it's not been so bad. And like I said before, Instant sort of up and running, and maybe it's going to be okay. But there is a sort of question about how you keep the show on the road, and that this is a bigger SRP. There's a question around leadership, and we'll need to talk about turnover of leadership and bringing younger people through as well. Okay, right, next slide. Do we want to go to the next slide?
I don't know. Do we want to let people speak
Yeah.
about that, and then?
Why not? Yeah. Okay, roving microphone. Is Daniela on the mic? Just test to see if people can
Test.
online.
That's loud. Just to make a comment on this, do we talk among the different themes and connected to that, do we deliver in the end on the overall mission? I would like to compare that to our cross-IODP expedition work. So we had all our individual cruises, we collect all our data, we publish, and only then usually we start to collaborate among the different projects, which means we need to have a certain product out first before we can think about interacting. And I think it's a little bit here as well. The themes as well, they define what they want to do first. They do it more or less successfully. And only when they are clear what they have, they can offer something to the others. And then this is initiated within Instant now. It may not come to the final conclusion once the program is over, but you have set the route to go along with it. I think so in the end, I think implementing that early on, that interaction will happen. It may happen post the actual program, but I think the route is clear that it can.
Bring up the other slide because I wanted to talk to a few points and I can't really remember them. First of all, in terms of how you did as an SRP, I think you did really, really well, just as kind of a bird's eye outside view. And you managed to.
Sorry, where is it? Sorry, where is it?
You're going to show all my email to everybody.
So I think also looking at it from another SRP's perspective, you did really well. And I think the conference was really the galvanizing factor. It was really well organized. It brought people together after COVID, which I think now from an Antarctica perspective, we miss a bit and we can learn from what you've done. You probably also need a bit more funding, but I know you bridge that gap really, really well by seeking also co-funding. In terms of working with policymakers and and I read that now as cross SRP, in terms of cross SCAR, SRP, and ICON and CLIM and instant connections, I think we need to do more, probably. I think the idea was behind the SRPs that we are all cross-fertilizing and working together a bit more.
Yeah.
And I don't think we are there yet.
Yeah.
And we've had our challenges, but I do wonder whether at the end of the next 4 years or towards the end, we actually organize a stakeholder workshop or conference that is specifically focused on policymaking, because all of the SRP have this policy element.
Yep.
And rather than getting the policymakers to 3 events, wouldn't it be nice to now plan for one large-scale stakeholder or advisory committee project to feedback and to get input and to also work with them into the future?
Yeah, so you get to hand it on to the next person, which is Terry. Great comment. Well, do you want me to respond to that or just about Terry? As you know, as we're learning in the game of working with end users and stakeholders, is an element of co-production, and so which is good, and so that's why we've got some stuff happening now. We wanted to front foot it, not leave it to the product that you do at the end. And I know you'd agree with that, Daniela. But I totally agree in terms of the learnings we're all getting, and then coming together towards the end with a policy focus. I don't know what it would be, symposium but with perhaps some products. Great idea. Yeah, we should talk more. With an 80, yes. We probably, yeah, because I mean, I'm sure your stuff, I know your stuff is all feeding in papers into the ACTM. But our audiences are slightly different. We have less, we've got a climate paper in there, we're doing some sea level, but we look more towards the UNFCCC, the IPCC and Future Earth and, those sort of stakeholders as well. But yeah, totally.
Yeah, I want to go back to the theme and also Mike's comments about intercommunication between the themes and et cetera. My understanding of the creation of this large program, instead of a continuation of PACE or CIRCE, et cetera, the whole point was have active communication between those themes, because otherwise we could have had 5 separate SRPs and they'd all be doing their own thing, right? So I think it is a challenge. My impression is that it's not nearly enough. And unlike, I agree with Mike said, of course, because you've got to work in your silo and pop things out of it. But on the other hand, I think perhaps more regular communications. I didn't touch anything. Perhaps you could consider deputizing your theme leaders to internally organize regular monthly discussions or some mechanism that doesn't fall on the shoulders of you and Flo alone, but is something that's proactive that stimulates that, and maybe they could be cross-theme webinars. I don't know. I think we could brainstorm about ideas of how to do it, but I think doing that better now is important for the program.
Glad you said that, Terry. I mean, I quite like Mike's response because it gets us out of trouble. But I do think Mike's right. We've got to have a certain amount of product before we can integrate. But we also could learn. The idea was to learn from each other about the interconnections as we go through that process.
Yeah, so just to sort of follow up on what Terry and Mike have said, you know, at least from my perspective, coming up through CERSI as a grad student postdoc and now research professor, I sort of saw what it fundamentally is the workflow of Natalia's paper, these projections out to 2500. And you had that community, right. You had that community interacting and engaging and talking about what do the ice sheet modelers need from the seismologists 5-10 years before Natalia's paper has come out. And so I think for instance, maybe we don't pull all these pieces together now, like Mike said, but we can build the foundation for putting them all together. And so if we can focus more on the themes, communicating and discussing, that way we all get up to speed, we all have the same vocabulary, we all know what pieces are important or what things should I go back and work on my side that you're going to need for your next step. And I think that's what's been maybe missing so far, but can be fixed. And I guess as a theme leader, it's sort of, I'm guilty of it.
Yeah, let me just also add, if I, for instance, look at theme 1, that's already much broader than anything we had before, right? Because it includes all the physical oceanography and all these aspects, which we didn't have in ACE or PACE before. And we already actively work with Natalia. We had papers with her and with Nick College. And so this interaction was already there. So I come back a little bit, I remember, to this diagram you had with the 3 groups in the center, and then there were like arrows floating everywhere. I think in reality, what I'm saying is some groups have already arrows flowing everywhere or in certain directions. I don't think that every group will in the end interact with every other group. That's just not going to happen. And that wasn't intended to, but maybe some have more need to say, no, we need to interact more. Or, or you provide a product and then nobody is using it, which would also not be nice. This is where interaction is needed and communication.
I sort of feel fairly confident it will come. And we do need these meetings though, and getting people, so maybe we need workshops. We won't talk about the SCAR carbon reduction plan at the moment, but maybe we do need to get together at some interdisciplinary workshops that focus on a specific issue, if we can identify what they are. And there's funding to support that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Mike, actually. At the beginning, we were definitely overly confident, so we did this beautiful diagram full of arrows going both sides. But you're right, I think not everyone is intending to connect to each other. I think most of the connection that should have happened already happened somehow. And I think I also agree with Terry and Andrew. I mean, they provide the basis and the example to the others on how to broaden a bit the connection. So yeah, I'm less stressed than I was at the beginning. But still, I think, for example, I personally think that from our side of co-chair, we could communicate more about the activity we do externally. And this is something I've started to do after the next COP, like sometimes feeding up about what was going on. But I think it could also stimulate a bit the community. I mean, from
other side. So this is something I would do more often personally, like just drop an email to the instant mailing list to say, okay, that's what we have been at so far. And I really realized we didn't do it. So it's not only the communication at sub-committee levels, it's also from us, because I mean, this is where we wanted to bring instant to, I mean, somehow. And we partly managed to do it, but now we really would like to bring the community and the people that are on it or happy to definitely get there to enjoy and have the same opportunities somehow. So I mean, from our point of view, in the next 4 years, this is where I would like to, I mean, this is the opportunity I would like to bring to the others. I hope I have those opportunities now. I really would like to open up to the others.
Okay, do you want to move on to the, yeah, I'll let you do it, Joe. Yeah.
Okay, so now I've got a slide for each of the maybe better share that with everyone.
Yeah.
So we've got a slide for each of the things that we think are important. There's about 4 things for the future. The first one being bridging science and societal needs. There's a whole list there of what that might mean. Who is society? You know, the policy, the public, the practitioners, the communication and the engagement side of things. Improve knowledge and communication of what's going on in Antarctica. It's complex. How do we explain that in a way that people understand? Collaboration with the sea level community was one of our goals, to actually be working with the people doing the projections, helping them improve their projections. So there's different projections frameworks, but the Bob Kopp probabilistic one that was used in the AR6 report is now the FACTS framework is up and running, and we can play with the modules and that. We can put different ice sheet projections into it. At the moment, it's largely doing just ISMIP and the low confidence scenario, or the low confidence model. So yeah, working with that community so that we're getting the best information into these probabilistic sea level projections. The ability to reduce uncertainty or at least explain uncertainty in our communication. I mean, one of the things that I think the community is asking for and end users are asking for are early warning signs. So that's something we need to, we've got the sea ice at the moment, but thinking about what are the precursors that are going to lead to something big happening to the Antarctic ice sheet where we might see a big kick in sea level. And so that's more than just our group, that's a broader community of people, but it's all linked. So yeah, early warning signs, so that planners can, this is just a random idea, but planners can go, okay, the sea ice is now at this critical threshold where we don't think it's going to come back. So what is, so in a planning situation, when do we expect to see some of these instabilities play out for West Antarctic ice sheet? So it's a tricky thing, but I think end users are asking for it. They want to understand it. They want to know, are there signposts our community can give them? And ultimately, what that does is it provides better information for coastal risk assessment and planners and practitioners. And also there's that international perspective of just helping decision makers understand at the IPC, at the UNFCCC and the treaty level. There's been some engagement with coastal communities that's been going on. We're doing a bit of it in New Zealand, and there was some really interesting talks at the Trieste meeting with Indigenous Maori from New Zealand, as well as Yupik people from the Arctic.
Yeah.
So those connections are being developed and could be part of our future. Tipping points is an emerging issue. Well, it's not really, it's been around for a while, but more and more we're being asked about tipping points, regime shifts or changes, tipping points. Can we get better understanding on when they will happen, if they will happen, what they will look like. And then down the bottom here,
Yeah.
is the geoengineering issue, which has really become quite a topical thing at the moment. Do we want to burrow into these now? What's the next slide?
No, the next slide is about new technologies. No, I think we should just let the floor to.
So we think these are some of the societally relevant parts of our program, but being scientists, we probably haven't captured them all. Are we missing key things there, or especially I'm thinking, yeah, Mike. Sorry.
So just to quickly say that we speak about geoengineering right at the end, like for those.
Yeah, just, I mean, I think that's a good list. I think one that I keep hearing about, and I think is an overlap, you know, we're talking about cross SRP communication, and overlap between us and AntClim now is on extreme events. And I think policymakers and the public are looking for us to contextualize what's happening in Antarctica. We've seen, you know, enormous winter, we saw the atmospheric rivers and so on. And I think AntClim now, I know Tom's online, just trying to grapple with this, and we've had papers and so on. But I think there's a role for Instant in this as well, from a longer term, maybe Holocene perspective in some of these events. So I think maybe particularly the ice core community could be really helping with that.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So extreme events should be on that list. And Tom is here. I had a coffee with him, but he's
he left.
Oh, he's left.
He joined
now
online.
he's okay.
I'm here now, though. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Ah, fantastic. Yes, I entirely about extreme events. But of course, we can think of extreme events more broadly than just other events, but also extreme climate events or other aspects that might be potentially more relevant to the ice sheet. So just to mention that.
You know, when we talk about these early warning signs, you know, to see atmospheric rivers, to see heat waves, and the potential that if a heat wave hits in the right part of West Antarctica, we could see widespread ice shelf melt and collapse. You're right, Mike. It's all linked in, and I can see Matthew wants to say something.
Yeah, sorry. So it might be a little bit controversial, but I feel like we've seen early warning signs for already a few decades, and it's more like I feel like society and politicians want to have like catastrophic early warning events, but like when we're there, it will already be too late, and I feel like this is where we have like a disconnect between what we want to express to them and what society is waiting for. And that's where I'm a bit uncomfortable, and I feel like there is a clarification to have between us and stakeholders and society, because like we already have the early warning signs in Antarctica and Arctic in the world, and now we have the consequences that are coming. But like those are two things, and society is more interested with the consequences, but in terms of science, the signs are already here.
Well, about the extreme events, I think that's not pretty true that the science is here. I mean, somehow perhaps we didn't pay attention to most of the signals before. It's more like when we discovered that the sea ice was expanding around Antarctica. Well, it's a shortcut, huh? But it took us a while to really figure out what was going on, and we are still unsure about what's going on actually. So everywhere. So the thing is, the science was not completely there. It's still under development, because the thing is, there are short-term events, but even though we have to define the time scale of what we call extreme events, and that's the point of the workshop that will happen next week actually. And so that's why you cannot transfer an information if you are not clear about what you want to transfer. I mean, so what is an extreme event? Is it the heat waves that we are having in our countries, like that last at the beginning, a decade ago, they were lasting 2 days, now they last a week. So is it still an extreme event? Or, you know, so these kind of things, I think. So the science now is getting connected, I would say. This was disconnected before. Now, how do we transfer the sense of urgency, which is what you probably meant, That's still the tricky question. I think we still didn't figure it out. I think that's also what I got from COP. I mean, it's complicated to say, oh, there will be 4 meters of sea level rise in 2 centuries. So it's urgent because the tipping point is now, but the consequence is catastrophic, but on the long term, so it's multi-generational problem. So that's the thing, right? So that's where the humanitarian people are important for that. I mean, how do you transfer the sense of urgency? Once you have the science more certain, let's say, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll come over to this guys for this. You were going to ask a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me on this?
No, I think this one I have.
Okay, I'll give you this in a minute. So we can have a semantic argument about. Sorry. Scared me too. We can have a semantic argument about what an extreme event is, because the extremes are becoming the norms, as Flo was saying. What is the 100-year historical event? So all of that's changing, but I think that's the key point. How do we get across the sense of urgency that we are seeing changes in the cryosphere and in the Antarctic? We already know from Matthew's paper that we can see the anthropogenic signal now of warming, which we were not sure about. We can see the sea ice so we're seeing these early warning signs, and how does this community communicate that in a way that's useful for stakeholders in the public?
Okay. Oh, g'day team. My name is Katie. I'm a social scientist. That is one of the questions that we've been looking at in the paper that we're presenting on this week. We've been looking at news headlines and the language, and more specifically the sentiment language that's used. And we know based on other climate research that people panic and disengage when it's too serious. So we need to find that balance. But also I think it's important that we, as a community of researchers, achieve coherence in the language that we're using. Because right now what we're seeing is that somebody might communicate something in a specific way, but then the media, for example, will go and interview somebody else who will override that messaging. So we need kind of a strategic communications plan as a team, really.
Yeah, great point. Not sure how we achieve that, because I can say in our own country, it depends which scientists you listen to, and you'll get a whole range of, and from COP, I know, at the TRIES meeting, there was quite a lot of pushback because Pam Pearson talked about, she wants to get stakeholders and decision makers' attention at COP. She's she's an activist, and she will always go for the big numbers and say, this could happen. But then our ice sheet modeling community go, well, but this other stuff could happen as well. Why do you always highball? And it's a really good question. How do we communicate with stakeholders if we want action, but also to remain credible that we're using the credible science?
One thing we could do is just in this group have some kind of strategic communication plan, because there's a lot of expertise in this group, as we know, we've got 300 and however many researchers. So we can't control the whole world, but we could have a strategic comms plan for us.
Yep. Danielle? Yeah, I'll read Richard's question first. Danielle.
Just to add to that, I think it shouldn't just stay within the group. This morning, when some of you were there was an EDI, Equity, Diversity and Inclusiveness meeting. And we actually talked about having a strategy across SCAR, rather than just always focusing on one group and then another group reinvents the wheel. So we need to share across all programs, across all SCAR groups, and we need to possibly stimulate that either maybe on the Wednesday or in discussions at a higher level at the delegates meeting. But on another point, maybe briefly back to extreme events, many of you will know there's a workshop, and there's I think a couple of sessions, workshop on Thursday afternoon. And please come and share your thoughts on that. When I read through your list of topics, a lot of them are very integrated. And I think especially the last one, a community that we are not currently including is the legal community. And geoengineering has huge legal and ethical implications, obviously. And I do wonder, you will?
We will have a chat.
Okay.
But bring that up again then.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the input. Yeah.
And Richard Levy's put up a question that might have been a bit old now, but I think it's really relevant to what you're saying, Daniela, about how integrated that, you know, we need to be, so freshwater feedbacks super important in terms of the effect on the carbon cycle and the ventilation of the ocean, the potential for surface cooling, maybe negative feedbacks as well as positive feedbacks. So this is Richard Levy's question. This is really important. It's complicated. The public don't fully understand it. They might read Natalia's paper and think we're saved if the Earth rebounds and slows the ice sheet down. Well, you know, people can take these things and yeah, don't worry, it will bounce back. But or don't worry, you know, that will acknowledges feedback, which then cools the surface ocean for a while. But yeah, so I think this is a really interesting area and it's cross-disciplinary. I just giving that to you and then Mike.
I think I work in marketing and I'm from an aerospace company, so I'm coming from a different standpoint than you guys, and it's all about message. What we have an issue with coming from the other side of the coin is the fact that how do you communicate to people the way they can understand? We get too much in our own head and we're talking and, you know, everybody understands each other, but the people from the other side, we're not just going from communicating to industries. We have 4 different generations that are communicating. And I live in Seattle, Microsoft area, the whole thing. And this is one of the big issues that everybody's dealing with is how do you communicate with the younger generation, with the MENA generation, with the other generation, then cross industry. You have to target it towards, it's all about people and how they understand something, not just the old fashioned mass marketing and all of that, because people are not relying on that anymore. So just a little bit.
Yeah, so I feel like this was a lot of great suggestions about having common languages, and in particular, a lot of you have been working with the IPCC and they have those common like lexicon for like uncertainties, which is for me the thing that usually journalists are the worst equipped to take in, like communicating with journalists, like they never understood what was a confidence interval or error bars or having a range of values for a range. So this I think would be a super cool initiative.
Yeah, just to add a little bit on that, providing a clear message and what Flo has said before. One thing I worked on at least a little bit is tipping points and passing thresholds. And I don't know how to communicate that to stakeholders or the public. But you know, it's exactly as she says. If we can say with a certain amount of confidence, we initiate something, but we only see the consequences in many decades or in centuries. That's beyond the stretch or interest of any politician. People will say that's not of our interest. But if you can communicate, listen, if we pass this threshold, there's no turning back, at least not for these decades to centuries. If that can be communicated, so it's clear, I think we can make a better impact. Maybe we haven't done that clearly enough. I wouldn't know how to do it, but that should be something we should think about. Because we see these, as you say, these signs of early warnings and all of this. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the fundamental questions is that we hear all the time from the community, from the public, is it now too late for the West Antarctic ice sheet? I think we polled everyone in this room, we'd get a range of answers. I tend to say maybe for the Amazon sector. Jury's out on the rest, but you know, so this really important stuff to be able to understand better. But then how do you communicate it in a useful way? And the bigger question I think for our group is, can we link with other groups to do the communication? Because we're mostly scientists. And even although we can help because we're knowledgeable, you know, so that's, and how much of this sort of theme 3 stuff are we going to invest in, as opposed to some of the more fundamental underpinning stuff? Maybe we don't have to answer that one, we just do it all. And so,
No, I was just, no, because you're, I will tell you if.
Just a quick comment, we're talking about tipping points and things in the future, but, okay. What about even just offering up what's baked into the system already? And maybe you were hinting at that a little bit there with your comment about the problems in Sea and Bannock region. And if you say, okay, this is what we're in for already, plus whatever else, does that help though?
Yeah.
Maybe that answer's out there, just, yeah.
I think it does with sea level rise, because you can point to the projections and say, we are going to get 0.5 meter by 2100 globally. We can now no longer avoid that. That's baked in. That's the minimum RCP or SSP 2.6, 1.9. So it's going to be more. And then if Antarctica does something. So I think there are really useful ways of communication to communicate this by letting people, there's no excuse for not adapting to that. We know we're getting that, but it could be a lot worse.
Should we go
Yeah, let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
If there's any online questions.
Do the people online have any comments or want to say something before we? No. Okay. Okay, so let's.
Okay, so what that should say, development of new technologies to bridge gaps in observations and modelling, and this is probably a fairly obvious one. The whole climate community is saying we need better ops so we can improve the models. And so we just throw up these sort of diagrams just to get the range of observations we need. I guess within SCAR, there's some big programs like the RINGS program that's spinning up. There's the InSync program. So there are some attempts to try and get more observational data.
Yeah, so during the instant conference, a couple of people from the technological companies developing scientific instruments contacted me because they wanted to attend the conference to get in touch with the scientists. So of course I invited them. I mean, of course, because it's an opportunity for us, but it's also an opportunity for them. I mean, if we want to effectively bridge some gaps, because for example, we are far away of monitoring our cavities. I mean, it's very punctual and it happens once and perhaps not the year after and only during summer and not during the winter, unless you put a mooring in front of the cavities and you put only one mooring. So it's a big trouble for us to monitor Antarctica from below, but also from above, because even satellite data, they're not very now. I mean, they're not providing us a complete, full, comprehensive data set. So now, if we want to really answer the question to the society and defining the extreme and the tipping points, we need to have a normal monitoring of the system, right? So it means the ocean around Antarctica, the atmosphere above Antarctica, I mean, the GIA with the geodetics and the ice itself, okay? So, I mean, right now we are just stuck because we are trying to plan some campaigns, trying to rely on each other cooperation and sharing of infrastructure, but we are struggling right now, right? I mean, as a modeler, this is the sense that I got from my colleague when I hear you speaking about planning campaigns, because it's very localized and it happened once. And okay, so what we need now is to develop and go forward with technologies so we can also do the things a bit more remotely. So it goes in the sense of the carbon footprint. We can optimize our infrastructure. So I mean, when I invited those people to the instant conference, this is what they had in mind. I mean, what are the instruments, the next generation of instrumentation that you need to really cover that, so you are comfortably monitoring your system and have a view about it. So that's what is behind this point here. So I wanted to hear a bit about what you would need to monitor in your particular system, like even if you think big, I mean, because we need to think big now, because it will take a decade to develop. I mean, even if technology is fast.
Yeah, I'll just add to that we've been very good historically at pulling together big, helping facilitate big international partnerships, whether it's IODP expeditions to target the marine margins, whether it's on land ice drilling, whether it's this Waste to Sea project. So that is one of the strengths of this group. It can really help bring resources together and scientists together, and leverage that sort of funding. But Flo's exactly right. It takes 10 years, 20 years to get some of these projects up and running, let alone whether you're instrumenting ice cavities or the ocean. So
that's perfect introduction. It's exactly what I wanted to say. I'm currently trying to install a new observatory, hopefully, and I'm very happy to discuss with anyone who has experience or ideas here, in the sense that I feel like to get the instruments there, to build them, to get them there, to install them, calibrate them is already 3 to 5 years. And then before you get the time series that's worth something that's more than 1, 2 years, that's 5, 10 years, it takes a lot of time. And so I feel like this is something a bit difficult, because in a science perspective also there is the funding, getting the funding to maintain this type of observatory is not very easy. So if anyone has experience and is happy to discuss about this at some point, I'm very happy. And I feel like this is something that could be good for the C1 to maybe have more interactions on this question.
it makes me cry, but I was just thinking about you, Terry. You don't make me cry often, but it does make me cry when we get these beautiful time series like the geodetic ones that only become useful after 10, 20 years. And we're pulling out the receivers.
I have this, it's working. Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of instruments we could talk about specifically for whatever your scientific objective is, but I think there are two things that as an international group we could try and jointly tackle. One is communicating the data directly from the field back. Without that, you lose it. We're losing our seismic data right now because we haven't had the logistic support to pick it up, right? And that's a technology area that I think probably with a little investment jointly, we could make that more accessible to more countries, and that gives us more spatial scope for making those measurements across Antarctica. The second thing is logistics. That's currently the biggest driver, in my opinion, for why we are not going to continue making those measurements in time series, because it's so expensive. And it's difficult for one country to continually invest in the same set of measurements. They want to do different measurements for different communities and et cetera. And if we could find a means as an international community to pool some of our logistic resources or funding to contract logistic resources, that we'd have a much better opportunity to continue the measurements in time series for 10, 20 years than we do right now.
Having a mental blank. Kirsty, of course.
I just wanted to kind of speak for rings a little bit that you mentioned and that was on the slide, because there's been, I think, a nice integration between rings and instrument. We are, I have to get this right every time, action. Active. And the focus of it is to try and coordinate logistics and surveys to get a circum-Antarctic measurement campaign on the coast. And we had a workshop a couple of years ago, which was trying to kind of bridge these themes as well and get observationalists and modelers to co-produce a survey plan, and then develop structures to get people to be able to work together in that way. So we sort of laid on a framework of measurements that would be needed. And now there's a process of, if you have a campaign that is accomplishing some of those goals, then you interact through the rings framework so that other people will find out about it. And you can show what your flight lines would be, because it did sort of was born of the geophysical community. But it's an opportunity to see where people are working and early in the piece, not just the year that they're going into the field. So it's possible to begin to build international collaborations, to say, hey, could you bring this instrument along? I know that mission creep is a problem with any field campaign that goes out, but just getting that information together early, so that we can be more collaborative. And it's been to have the brain space of instant making those connections together. This is a mechanism that we're trying to get to work in one part of the Antarctic system, and yeah. Ask me about it if you need to know more about it.
Talk to Kirsty or Kenny. Is Kenny around?
Yeah, Kenny's stuck at the airport. I will be there today.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about rings, it's a super important initiative. I don't know so much about it in sync. Maybe someone else here knows a bit more about it in sync. Do you know?
Yeah, I can speak a bit about it a little bit. So it is led by Abby right now, okay? And the idea, I mean, the initial idea was to do some kind of synchronized campaign, oceanographic campaign, mainly around Antarctica, during the year 27, in between 27 and 29, basically. So what they are trying to do is to coordinate, so among different countries, the different campaigns, so to go together. However, so there are many scientific questions that have been put out about oceanic circulation, carbon sink, geochemistry, and these kind of things. But now it's all open to the Antarctic system, Southern Ocean Antarctic system, sorry. So it's also about the ice sheet interaction with the ocean, the ice sheet interaction with the atmosphere, and how we can have a comprehensive view of this polar system, let's say. So we are in the building phase now of Antarctic InSync, and so they are collecting the ideas of the different working groups that can definitely promote this kind of synchronized research around Antarctica. So that's a try. I mean, that's a try to see if we can do that from logistical point of view, because this is a challenge. It means that the coordination between the different agencies, the Antarctic programs, and also in terms of protocols for taking the measurements, right? Because they all have to be then comparable. So right now they are collecting some new also scientific questions. So for example, they ask the modelers also to step in because they would like to understand where are the real needs also, and what we can do out with those data that will be collected during 1 or 2 campaigns around Antarctica. And so we had already a lot of discussion with the InSync people, the Antarctic InSync people. And personally, I suggested something that, I mean, they also suggested something that, for example, the campaign that would happen before or after the official, let's say, Antarctic InSync campaign could be anyway affiliated to the project. And then I suggested then that we have some workshops, and this will happen next year, about finding common ground to define the metadata and the protocols to make the measurements. So then every campaign that would happen before or after, following those protocols, can then feed into InSync, Antarctic InSync. Because otherwise it would be mostly impossible for all countries to really synchronize their crews around Antarctica during 1 year, but properly. So they're very open to that. So the discussions are now completely ongoing, and so you can contact the Antarctic InSync people, and I think there will be a presentation about that next week. So you can directly go to them. They are completely open to any even scientific suggestion for new working group anyway. So don't hesitate. I think that's a good opportunity, because then if we want to repeat such an exercise, if this is successful, this will definitely be powerful in terms of synchronizing geopolitics and logistics and science together. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted, I can make 3 quick observations on observations. The first one is just to completely agree with Terry about things that we could do collectively that would really help is about remote communications, remote comms. So satellite communication of data back from autonomous systems reduces the logistic burden. It's more likely we can keep networks going if we can do that. I think similarly developing fuel and power systems. So, you know, there's great hope of fuel cells and things like that. It's been talked about for decades, but if we could collectively work on those with engineers, that would be really helpful. I think the second one on the observations is please acknowledge the data. One of the challenges we've had with keeping a UK equivalent of the PolNet network going is people not acknowledging our data. We're aware of papers coming out that are using our GPS data, but not acknowledging them. And we're trying to then go back to our funders, say, keep funding it, people are using honest, but we're having to go and try and work out who's using it. So I think that needs that acknowledgement. And the third observation would be, I think sometimes with technologies and observations, there is a seduction in going for the really big, kind of very expensive bits of kit, like the really big AUVs, the really big airborne, all the rest of it. They're important, but there's a role also for small, cheap measurements in kind of swarm capability. And I'll never forget seeing the data where I saw some cruise CTD data from the Antarctic Sea, and I saw the same area covered by about 10 elephant seals, right the way through an entire year, going into the winter, much better coverage, temporal coverage, and so on. So just sometimes cheaper can be better for the particular purpose.
We have this question, and then I see Richard Levy. You've got a question, a comment. We'll get you to ask your question after this next one.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria. I'm a space policy advisor. I used to work with UNOSA COPUOS, the Scientific Subcommittee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. So I also a researcher on the merge on Antarctica and space. So this is my second scar. I'm not so new, but not so old on Antarctic. And for the other side, I'm an advisor on the Antarctic operation for the National Operation of Defense here in Chile. So I was looking this model. I was hearing your concerns. So my principal question for you is why, if the protocols for sharing satellite data already exist, I mean, we have a whole space treaty system regarding to share the satellite data, satellite information. I'm not only talking about raw data, I'm talking about from the final product until the raw data for safety of those activities being conducted under the umbrella of multilateral forums such as the Antarctic Treaty System. So, for example, if we want to conduct a search and rescue task on Antarctic, the international community must share all the satellite, all the technological components, final products, SATCOM, remote sensing, among all, in order to saving lives, because saving life will be strengthen the peaceful uses in the case of Antarctic, but also on outer space. In my humble opinion, I think that the solution is very easy. The solution goes by the idea of developing Antarctic/space policies, because we need to implement and to close the gap between the space protocols with the Antarctic protocols. So it's not a technological solution, because we have the technology, we have the protocols coming from space to sharing the data, to deploying the data for a peaceful activity. The other thing that we must do is developing from our side those policies as non-binding instrument in order to stress the compromises of international actors of any state, institute, and close it up on this model of triple helix, combining academic, state, and private. So that is, it's not very difficult, but it's just to going and moving on into a non-binding instrument, not a tricky Antarctic space policy. That is my opinion.
There's obviously thank you for that. There's the question of sharing data, which you've spoken to, and the question of acquiring and providing data as quickly and widely as we can, which is where Mike and Terry have been. Then there's the question of time is short, but we can't stop. We've got to keep putting our instruments in and understanding the system. We may lose the ice shelf we're studying in the process, but you know, I don't think there's an argument to say don't monitor because it's too late. I think we've always got to keep these time series going, prove our roles. So I'm not going to head down that track and make another provocative statement. Okay, and now, Richard, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, jeepers. Oh, look, I might have been speaking a little bit ahead of myself here. Just heard you talking about the time it takes to bring these big, multi-faceted, multi-tech initiatives together, and it just triggered a comment I'd wanted to make that Molly Patterson and Hugh Horgan the other day, we ran a Ross ice shelf sort of waste meeting to try to bring the next group of or develop the next international partnership to do a lot of what is shown on the slide that Flo has up, bringing the various tech together. And just to give a couple of examples, Ryan Venturelli was talking about a coring system that they want to deploy through the existing hole at Waste Divide that was made for the ice core to try to tag the basal conditions and get some samples beneath the waste. Hugh Horgan was talking about geophysics approaches to cover lots of ground much faster, more efficiently to help improve the excellent data set we have from beneath the Ross Ice Shelf, but we know there are large errors in those airborne geophysics data in certain areas. So to try to keep improving those really important bathymetric data sets. And so it was an opportunity just to mention to this group that there is an initiative that we're trying to spin up again for the Ross Sea, looking at the cold cavity switch. It looks like the Ross Sea region might be one of the last parts of West Antarctica to go. And so again, trying to identify by monitoring, by getting additional data, information that we can then feed to stakeholders to say, well, shit, it looks like the Ross Ice Shelf's about to collapse. So now we're in for at least 4 meters rather than perhaps 1 or 2 from Thwaites going. So just wanted to highlight, if you're interested in this and sort of thinking about developing international partnerships around these monitoring approaches and data collection approaches now, drop an email to Molly. She'd be more than happy to hear from you all.
Thanks, Rich. I'm sure she would. She'll be very pleased you've made that case, but yeah, no. We better move on, but this is a tough area and it's one we've got to keep doing the best we can with our collective international resources, not just relying on one nation. And anything this group we should do to facilitate this. Okay, so I think maybe you want to talk to this one, Flo, but one of the other strategic focuses is partnerships, because it's a complex ecosystem out there. We're not the only ones interested in the Antarctic ice shed and predicting its future behaviour and modelling it. And so if we want to be effective, we need to work with these other communities as well in a way that doesn't duplicate but complements.
Yeah, so I mentioned that already at the end of the first part of this workshop, that, for example, in the case of ISMIP, they're a bit struggling because they need manpower, they need also resources for calculation, computations, and these kind of things. And they are, as all of us, struggling to get fundings for the normal research. So it's even more complicated if they have to, or they feel they have to provide the projections for the IPCC, for example, which is what is going on right now. They feel that burden somehow, not that they're not interested, but they feel that they have to produce that. So they put pressure on their own postdocs and on themselves to still continue providing these kind of things. The same happened to PALC because we need some constraint about sea level rise, for example. So it's a continuing process, but we feel that there is not enough support from our own, let's say, national agencies or these kind of things. Every country has recognized the urgency of the cryosphere, but no one is really committed to really, let's say, invest into this kind of science. I mean, so it happens very punctually. It's not on a regular basis, not in every country. And so it makes a lot of pressure on everyone, actually, like the one doing observations, can be present day or past or this kind of thing. So the idea was to use the influence that we have somehow, sometimes to transfer the message somewhere, to put some pressure on our national agencies somehow. but by trying to make some alliance, like a scientific alliance with already existing initiatives. For example, with TEAM, we are very keen on supporting ISMIP in this process in many ways. I mean, could be supporting them to get some recognition with some fundings or these kind of things. I mean, around some providing some support later, some contacting the IASC to say, okay, we need to somehow convince the others to put some fundings into this kind of activities. So this is what we are talking about right now. We would like to define a few, let's say, targets for the next 4 years, because it's demanding. It means that we will have to contact people again and again and trigger some discussion. So this will require some networking a lot to help the few initiatives that we think could really make the difference in the next decade, let's say. Okay, so I took the example of ISMIP, but it's open to anything, okay, that we think in instant could be very strategic to push, okay. And this will rely on the networking through our steering committee that we have not been involving too much in the first 4 years, but we really would like to rely on them now for the next 4 years, relying on the same leaders, etc. So we would like to put an active networking activities in trying to push few specific points that we think are strategic for the research community and help them to go through it any way we can help somehow. So I don't know if you have some idea about that.
Questions? So Sophie Nowicki is involved in ISMIP, and Richard Levy are the co-leaders of Theme 3. And Richard's online, he might want to say something, but there have been some good conversations on how we might work with the ISMIP initiative on perhaps aspects they're not, perhaps on aspects that their models are not capturing in terms of the Antarctic uncertainty. What that looks like, don't know. Oh, yeah, what has he got? Sorry, got to go. So we won't be hearing from Richard. And we do want to spend the rest of the time, we're going to close off at 6 talking about geoengineering, but are there any questions related to these partnerships that might be useful or strategic to achieve our goals? That's just one, there could be others. CLIC are having their meeting next Saturday, they're here, I think I mentioned that before, so there's another opportunity to talk with them about those partnerships. Yeah.
Well, that's true that right now we really would like to talk about the last topic, because for us it's very, very important as much as all the other topics, but this one you can think about it and definitely come back to us, and we can also have a workshop online at some point to really talk about it. So please have that in mind, because this is what we really would like Instant to do in the next 4 years, not only but one of the major missions that we would like to target is helping few initiatives that we think are relevant for everyone. So.
Okay, geoengineering. I'm going to do a quick intro to what I think some of the issues are, then I'm going to ask Mike Bentley's offered to come and say a few words. And Flo, you may want, because you had your experience with a philanthropist. So just cutting it right back, this issue of climate intervention, of intervening with the climate, because we're not making progress fast enough on emissions mitigation. Can we do something technological to affect the climate system, whether we do something to the atmosphere, do something in the cavities of the ice shelves? Are there ways we can intervene and cool the planet, basically? This has been fueled a little bit because the billionaire philanthropists would like to see more action and would like to be influential in achieving some of their goals before they die and in their lifetime. So there's money being put out there. I'll get Mike to speak to these two initiatives, but what I will say just before I hand over to Mike is that the WCRP, the World Climate Research Program, have acknowledged this as a major issue that they need to move into. They've set up a lighthouse activity on climate intervention, but it doesn't cover the polar regions, apart from solar radiation modification, which is doing something with the polar atmosphere. Their aim is to provide rigorous, robust, scientific assessment of what we know and what we don't know right now. And so that can be used in discussion about the future. So let's hand over to the polar region. Did you want to say something first, Flo? And then we'll go to Mike. Yeah.
Just because I wanted to tell you the origin of these initiatives, actually. So when we went at COP, last COP in Dubai, Martin Siegert, Regina Hock, and I have been very, very surprised of the amount of events dedicated to geoengineering, and especially in polar areas. We didn't expect it that those kind of events would already have reached that high level somehow, because when we are at COP, it's already governmental level. Okay, so we have been following many of those events when we could. Even the Russian organized one event about geoengineering in the polar areas, but we couldn't attend for political reasons, so we were not keen on stepping on these events. However, our idea of what happens to COP is that there are many things that are wrong, many ideas, and I'm sure Mike will speak about them. But right now, there is no, let's say, there is no sense of what is really geoengineering. There is no ethics, there is no governance, there is nothing around that. So it's a bit jingle. And so at COP, it was a bit dangerous to our point of view, because any members of government or parliament could step into this kind of events, hear about geoengineering as if it would be a fixed, quick solution to any problem at some point. And okay, so let's do it. And we asked a few members of government that we could hook on after those events if they had strong opinion about geoengineering, and most of the answers that we got were no, but we would like to know more about that. So after the COP, we decided to come back to SCAR, and just to because we are polar scientists, so we definitely didn't care about other areas, but we decided to alert SCAR about that, just to say, okay, this is what's going on right now. People are already reaching the polar areas, and they're already thinking about making some stuff in the Arctic, mainly, and also in the Antarctic. What do we do about that? That was the beginning of the whole discussions that have been there on and on in different groups around, because you will figure out that there is no strong opinion about that. Well, no, there are many strong opinions about it, let's say.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Flo, thanks, Tim. So I was going to give a quick summary of where a group of us have got with some discussions about polar geoengineering and the response of the scientific community to some ideas that have been pushed out there. I think, everybody knows about geoengineering. Some of the ideas have been around since Crutzen, decades have been around. But this has absolutely shot up the agenda for the polar regions in just the last 18 months or so. And as Tim and Flo have hinted, that at some COPs, a number of us have been really shocked at how slick and well-funded a whole bunch of proposals for doing some quite severe and major intervention in the polar regions have been presented. And when the policymakers, the ministers, the climate negotiators have asked the scientific community what they think, and most of us will tell them what they think, they say, where's that written down? And the answer is it isn't. And many of these things are crazy. Some of them might work, but have some unforeseen consequences potentially associated, or some very foreseen consequences. And for all of them, there are some real ethical and governance features. So what's happening is there's a number of different strands of work going on. The one I know less about, but is out there and has been emailed round a very large group of people, is the Glacial Climate Intervention Workshop results, which was run out of Stanford, I think it was, but involving the Harvard group and so on. And that was set up as a sort of red team, blue team sort of idea about pro, con, coming up with some of the ideas, some of the problems and so on. They wrote a report. And then very much on the polar geoengineering, a group of us are in an advanced stage of writing a paper led by Martin Siegert and Heidi Silvestre, which many of us in the room are co-authors on, which is trying to put some science into the space of these proposals, some of these ones that are coming out. Just to give you an idea, In the polar context, things like refreezing the Arctic sea ice by thickening it, by pumping seawater onto the surface, letting it rethicken, by delivering thousands of tons of ceramic beads into the Arctic Ocean, so it will refreeze, increase the albedo. In the Antarctic context, putting in large seabed curtains running tens to hundreds of kilometers to try, these are floating curtains anchored to the bed, floating materials of some undescribed substance that will then stop circumpolar deep water reaching the grounding line of vulnerable glaciers. And there are, of course, the solar geoengineering, the stratospheric aerosol interventions, injections that have been talked about in the global context, but they're becoming increasingly relevant to the polar regions, particularly Antarctica, because time and time again, the climate modelers who do this work are saying that the stratosphere is lowest in the polar regions, and therefore the best place to access it is from the polar regions. And so there are very real plans now of flying fleets of aircraft out of Punta Arenas to spray aerosols into the atmosphere around Antarctica. So a group of us writing this paper, and we're just trying to put some science into that space around, will they work technically? Some of the other ideas, pumping basal water out of ice streams, pumping extra seawater onto the ice sheet to increase snowfall and so on. So we're going through each of these proposed geoengineering ideas. Would it work? What are the foreseen kind of negative consequences we could see? Where might the unforeseen consequences be? Are they feasible in cost terms? Right at the heart of it, the ethics and governance of it. We've got two different situations at the poles. We've got a non-sovereign space in Antarctica run by treaty. So who decides what happens there? Well, it's the treaty. So how would that work? How would the treaty deal with it? But of course, in the Arctic, you've got a series of sovereign spaces with countries having to decide whether they want this to happen. But these geoengineering initiatives will not respect international borders. So there's a real issue there about, do you want space mirrors above you? Who's going to make a decision about it? If you want these stratospheric aerosol injections above you, who makes a decision? Who decides about what happens above you and whether your climate and your crop success is dictated by some of these things? So we're going through technical feasibility, consequences, cost, ethics and governance, and some of the consequences of the moral hazard. So this distraction from, we know the answer to this is to reduce emissions. Tim was saying earlier on, we have to phase out fossil fuels. And actually leaving this problem through these interventions simply delays the problem. And in fact, creates all sorts of problems about termination shock. If you stop doing this because of war or conflict, you'll get all your warming, all the models show, you just go straight back to where you would have been. All the non-temperature related consequences of warming, such as ocean acidification, they will just carry on whatever. So this paper should be out later this year. It's going to be in Frontiers. It will come with an awful lot of other things, some op-eds. It's going to have stuff for children, for the public, and so on, trying to explain the background to some of these ideas and why some of the arguments against them. So we're trying to fill some of that vacuum. I think the reason why we want to talk about it here is we have to decide as a community how much we're going to engage with this. I think there has been a sense of actually backing off it for several years. My personal view is, and there'll be a range of views in the room, is we can no longer back off it. And it can be incredibly irritating to have to do a whole lot of work to show something that you know is bonkers. Whether you're a climate modeler or whatever, or you're a seabed geologist, marine geologist, showing that anchoring these seabed curtains between hard rock and soft sediment, it's just not going to work. Yeah, so, but we are probably going to have to engage with this. We're a small community, we could do without this, but we're probably going to have to engage. Is that kind of what you wanted from me?
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you. Stay there.
Okay.
We're going to go to the audience, and Flo, I just want to make one more. I just think it's really important to frame the scar side of things. That Mike's, we're going to have to deal with it. Is Chandy still in the room? We've been having these conversations about the treaty. At some stage, they are going to ask SCAR for the sort of thing that's in this paper. So that's why this paper is really good. And we're going to have to provide policy relevant information on that. So, yeah, sorry, Flo, you go. I just wanted to put that SCAR.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, Tim. It's very important that we want to address this problem from the community point of view, though everyone here might have his own opinion. The thing is, so I've been invited in a meeting founded by Frederick Paulson last May. It was a meeting dedicated to geoengineering in polar areas, actually. And he was not interested in doing the science fiction stuff of the geoengineering, but he was interested in finding local solutions to help local population, which sounds more feasible. Well, probably some of them are more feasible locally, right? One of the research he's funding right now is the test of this curtain in Greenland fjord. So there will be a paper out this fall, probably by a Finnish researcher. She was there at this workshop and she presented her research. It was only the social aspect of that. So she has been interviewing the local population about, do you want to have this curtain or not in the fjord? And so the local population said no, because it will change the complete ecosystem and the balance of the equilibrium of the fjord. Of course, as a scientist, I of course thought the same, because I don't know if you know how it works a fjord. It's an anti-estuarine system. So you have bottom water entering and surface water exiting, right? So if you put a curtain in a fjord, you somehow stop from the inflow, okay? And so you stop the ventilation of your waters. Of course, you change your ecosystem. But what he was interested to was how can we find a solution around this problem? So to let the inflow anyway, but put some curtain and retain some of the heat to reach the grounding line of these glaciers and stop the retreat somehow. And then speaking with all the scientists that were there, because we were a bunch of scientists, like glaciologists, biologists, social scientists, also, I mean, so at least they were more numerous than us scientists, actually. And that was interesting because and that's the last thing I will say, and then we open the floor to everyone. There is a big societal dimension to geoengineering. And when we speak among us about the science, that's true, we are scientists, but we also forget that there is a big societal impact of these things. And the first people that has to accept or not these kind of things are the citizens, not the scientists. The scientists come after that. The scientists, in the decision making, the scientists just say, okay, then it will be doable this way, not doable this way, or whatever. But the first decision is the population to be accepted. But if we want the population to take the right decision, the decision in full awareness of the impacts, big or negative, we need to provide the basics of the science. So that's the idea. And as a community, we will be consulted more and more often. And I think it's already happening in the Singular Institute somehow. But sometimes we got a phone call about geoengineering that. So it will happen more and more. This is what's occurring. This is what happened in May. I found this workshop very interesting, very instructive, because we were all, let's say, academic people. So we all had nice discussion. It was not an animated debate, but we reasoned about the societal dimension of the geoengineering, which is not to be underestimated. It's a big part of it.
Okay, let's open it up for questions. Just for context, the scientific community does not have a position, a clear position on this. The paper that Mike's involved leading with Martin, that we're involved with, pretty much takes the point of view that all of these things are bonkers, don't try them, they don't work, put your effort into proper mitigation and adaptation. The red report up here is a little different. These scientists are a bit more optimistic about the role of these potential interventions and want to explore, some of them want to explore, and they say, well, before we make a decision, shouldn't we do some testing in Antarctica to see, are they going to work and that sort of thing. So we're polarized as a community, we're polarized. And as Flo says, the implications for us, the citizens, and for humanity are so big, we can't stay out of this debate, particularly as we are the ice sheet sort of ocean scar along with Anklin 21. And there's for Anklin now. Question down the back. Yeah, I think we can push on for a few minutes if people are happy. You can leave if you want to, or we can push on for a few minutes.
Quick. I think it is really, really important for SCAR to look into this. I totally agree. I've been following a bit the publications that come out sometimes about geoengineering in Antarctica. The ones you mentioned, the ones who seem to believe that you can use Antarctica almost like a laboratory in terms of geoengineering and geoengineer our problems away. So I think we can't be silent on it. And we need to be proactive and well done on the paper, Mike and team. But I also wonder whether this issue leads itself to an action to look into either under instant, or maybe you've been thinking about that, because social science and especially psychologists they're already looking at that, the framing of communication and why people put their hopes into these kinds of things. And I think it's a communication issue with us and policymakers and the rest of the world. So I'll just leave it there, but I just thought I'd put that out there.
Thanks. So I'll just add to what Tim has said about where this currently sits within SCAR. So because this is such a contentious and sensitive issue, I think the SCAR delegates that are the sort of ultimate oversight body of SCAR need to be introduced to the issue and actually mandate SCAR to look at this before anything happens, because it is so sensitive. It needs to come from the top. So next week, as Tim mentioned, Tim will present the instant report and mention geoengineering, flow, excuse me. And geoengineering will be mentioned there. In addition, the SCAR Vice President for Science, Danette Kurentz, will mention geoengineering, and she's going to propose, and this is something that a few of us have talked about, that SCAR sets up a climate group, initially within this the Standing Committee on the Antarctic Treaty System within SCAR. Sorry, there are so many acronyms floating around, but basically SCAR has a group that deals with its interactions with the Antarctic Treaty System. And all the other SCAR groups liaise with the treaty through that one group, because otherwise things get disjointed and we lose a coherent messaging. So initially there will be a climate group within this SCATS group, the Antarctic Treaty System Standing Committee. And that climate group we're going to propose is where the conversation on geoengineering initially takes place. And I think that mechanism is important because it makes sure that SCAR as a whole has a coherent message on geoengineering going through to the treaty. So that is what's going to be proposed next week. So I think rather than propose to initiate a brand new group on geoengineering within SCAR, which would raise all sorts of questions about, does the group have a position, or does SCAR have a position? And we don't want a position, we just want to be looking at the technical suggestions and proving, as Mike said, that they're not workable. Or I don't want to preempt, but yeah, I think we're all agreed on that. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. Questions?
I have also I've been also seeing this, and I remember the Polar Initiative event in Paris last November. There were a lot of discussion about this.
Yeah.
And for me, there is also the issues. I feel like geoengineering has been the new refuge for climate skeptics and big lobbying companies to try to push, like, it's not possible to say climate change is not happening and it's not due to anthropogenic activities. But now, they will have the next thing, which will be geoengineering will provide the solution, so we don't have to worry, we don't have to make those economies. I don't know if this is already discussed in this paper, but I feel like this is another a bit adjacent topics of something you were already mentioning, Tim, that basically geoengineering won't be the solution to all those problems. And I don't know, again, if this is in the mandate of SCAR or the mandate of Instant to have kind of a strong standpoint on this.
I think one of the things that will be a double-edged sword is that some of these billionaire philanthropists might approach you and say, hey, I hear you're drilling to the base of the ice sheet. Here's a few $1 million to do it. But we'd also like to test this idea of this thing. So that will be an interesting thing for the treaty to deal with, for us, SCAR, to deal with when we start to get this, this funding coming in. And can you buy, should we be purchasing, should others be able to purchase our science? I don't know. Yeah.
But this is already happening somehow. So, but the thing is, when it will happen to Antarctica, yeah, the treaty should be prepared. I mean, that was the sense of our alert after the One Planet Polar Summit in Paris and the COP. Like the Antarctic treaty system should be prepared, at least, like even not having like, you know, to take some decisions or whatever, but at least be informed and prepared. And this the same for us. I mean, we should be informed and prepared, I think.
So I think as far as this group goes, in what Chandy's just said, we're leaving the new group that might be approved within SCATS to make any official comments or assessments on behalf of to manage this. I mean, I'm not sure what we would actually do apart from the sort of work Mike's just showed, where we can put out an assessment. Whether we're actually going to start doing research, some of our members are going to do research to evaluate some of these. I mean, are we going to say no?
So Tim, I think ultimately we're talking about the same people within SCAR, just sitting with a different group hat on. Instant would be the place, I believe, that the actual substantive conversations would happen about the technical aspects. And this group we're talking about is more of a communications arm. So I don't think that, yes, in terms of official statements, I think we'll wait for the delegates meeting next week. But I think, as with any statements that relate to policy, then they go through SCATS, and this group will sit within SCATS. So I don't think it will change anything about how that works. But I certainly think that individual, it goes without saying, individual scientists within SCAR that shouldn't make statements about this wearing a SCAR hat. And if you do interviews, I would advise you make sure that the journalist knows that you're not speaking for SCAR, because quite often the journalist will go up and look up who you are. And we've had a few articles published where they've said so-and-so who is part of SCAR says this, so just be a little cautious.
Okay, it's a bit of a long afternoon. Many of us are still suffering from the jet lag, dinner and refreshments. So we've got plans, I'm sure. So I don't know what we want to say to sum up, except thanks for coming. Thanks for being such active participants within the program. There'll be more, you'll hear more from us. We're going to have a meeting with our leadership group around leadership, actually. So one of the things we need to think about, you've given us some information, is changes in leadership within your themes and subcommittees, and then we'll talk more about that in October.
So thank you very much, and enjoy the conference. We'll see you around.
Thank you.
Ciao.
It's pretty exciting this new yeah, I think it's good. Yeah, it's going to be for it's good to have that overlay. Something that we do. I am
Right. White balls, but that's the stuff. Recording.